Welcome everybody to the first Duo Talk episode of 2024. And Matthew Cochrane and I are delighted to have a whole bunch of friends with us. It's just like basically hanging out tonight. It's just a group of people we've known for ages and absolutely love to have on the show. So we'd like to welcome the Escocia Duo, which is guitarist Roberto Kuhn Versluys and violinist Katrina Lee. Hey.
Hiya.
And you're both in different parts of the world at the minute, yeah? Roberto's in Scotland and Katrina, you are in Yorkshire, right?
I'm in Huddersfield.
Oh,
back in my family home.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. Well, thank you both for joining us. And then all the way from Slovenia, we have the wonderful Uros Baric from your studio.
Yeah, hey everyone. Hi.
Great to have you all with us. So we're delighted that you're able to join us for this first episode of the year. And it's really apt because you've released such a stunningly beautiful album.
Yeah.
Absolutely gorgeous. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's a privilege, to be your first guest on the show this year. Thank you for having us.
We're fans. We're very excited to talk about this project and talk about the process of it and see how you came up with what ideas you came up with and how you made it happen.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And so I should just say that obviously we have so many different topics on Duo Talk. We have lots of different musicians come on, often duos, guitar duos, other guitar duos, not just the same as, myself and Matthew. Other, artists want to share a new project that they're working on or all sorts of things. And tonight we just get the chance to devote a bit of time to, like Matt says, talk about the process. We've got Uros here as well, who recorded, engineered and produced the album. So he can get right into the nitty gritty about microphones and all that sort of thing, which is really exciting as well. So the album is a collection of all South American music, which you've arranged a lot of for violin and guitar. That's fair to say, yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah, we basically had a really interesting process, didn't we? So I arrange very carefully and say to myself, like, this is really how I want things to go. And then I present it to Katrina and she goes like, nah. let's change it up. Let's do this, let's do that. So, but yes, in general terms, like every track there, we arranged it ourselves and we adapted it as much as possible as we could for our ensemble.
Amazing. So Katrina, do you just like say what is it you need in an arrangement that you don't get first time?
Well, I guess it's in collaborative spirit. If I deny Roberto of any of his arranging, I guess, Roberto, he's fantastic. I really can't fault him for all the arranging and effort that he puts in to making sure that the repertoire that we play feels, diverse. It feels exciting and it feels really a good match for sort of a plucked and bowed string instrument. And I think sometimes, the changes that I want, sometimes I can get a bit over enthusiastic and I say, oh, what if I do a bit of plucking here? And he's like, no, maybe you should stay and just do a bit of bowing. Or I'm like, maybe I could do some double stops. I'll accompany you. And, it's just an exciting time to maybe review what each other are thinking at different points and thinking, how can I add to it as well? But I absolutely think like this project has been Roberto's, baby in a way, because this is, music that he's grown up listening to and he's, absolutely he spent so long, it's invested in it. And for me, I feel very lucky to have shared this part of his culture.
That's lovely. That's gorgeous. Yeah. And it's interesting you talking about like, wanting to imagine different orchestration, almost when it must free you up as a violinist quite a lot, I guess, because it gets you off the page and into your head and your imagination about what you can maybe do with the instrument.
Yeah, absolutely. Violin repertoire, it's vast and there's so much of it. But actually, when you're allowed to have a little bit more artistic license and have an imagination of how you want something to sound and develop, maybe, and as you said, the different possibilities that are available with every arrangement that we do, then that becomes really exciting, because I guess in performance as well, there can be an element of spontaneity. Sometimes even if you've made a decision about something and, in the moment it might feel a bit different and you can you can play something and you know, it doesn't need to be as it's written, or you know, it can be as it's felt maybe in the moment. So that was good for my monkey brain, maybe. Maybe it takes Roberto by surprise sometimes.
And so, how much of the of the arrangement that you see on the page does the listener actually hear? I mean, obviously there's a process between you know, imagining something happening, and then you sort of take it into a rehearsal setting, and maybe there's some ideas that work, maybe there's some ideas that don't work. It doesn't really sit on either instrument the way you had planned, and then getting from there to actually performance and then recording it. I'm sure there's a pretty substantial process there. We'd love to hear a little bit about the differences between what the concept is and then how the reality actually ends up coming through.
Do you want to go, Roberto?
Yeah, I think maybe both of you lived it more than anyone else, because when I arranged like that piece, like Interstellar, for both of you,
Oh yeah,
it's basically that same process. It's like we treat the written part of the music just as a first step, and I think we're both quite open and quite flexible with that. We don't go like, okay, that's set in stone, and from there we take and we start changing things, seeing what works, what doesn't. And at times I'm quite ambitious with what I write down on the page, and Katrina takes it a bit as a bit of a challenge, self-imposed challenge. I go like, okay, but don't worry, like you can take some notes here, and she goes like, no, I'm gonna play this, I'm gonna just you wait and see. But more than anything, I think that really has liberated us to maybe exactly have a bit more spontaneous on how we play it on stage, and even how we approach it on rehearsals. And I think that is one of those things that when you're in a creative program, you know, studying, at times you wonder in classic, in any instrument, like the creative process feels a tiny bit at times tame, because you're still bound a bit by what is written, and it feels super nice to at times just be able to jump from that and do things a bit differently.
And the repertoire suits it, right? You know, I mean, it's not Handel or Bach or I mean, you can be free with that music too. I don't want to sound like, you know, you can't touch that either. But like, you know, there's Piazzolla on the record, there's Roberto Gismonti on the record. There's a huge host of music that, you know, has an improvisatory style to it. The harmony lends itself to going off on a tangent and stuff like that. Shall we? I think it's time to hear a little bit of the record, and also in that process of listening and watching, we get to see Uros' studio as well. So we've got a question already from a listener, and I should mention to all of our listeners, as you're listening to the beautiful performance you're about to hear, if you've got any questions about the arrangements, or questions about violin and guitar, or just questions about recording, or any of the things that we're getting into tonight, just make a comment, post a comment, and we will do our best to answer it. So Phil's already jumped in and said, are the violin and guitar of a similar volume? And did you have to manage the balance in the recording? Which is a fantastic question. And I think we'll come to Uros for the answer, but we'll come straight after we hear a little clip of some Piazzolla played by Roberto and Katrina when they were recording at the wonderful Baros Records. Bravo.
Fabulous work, you two. Really fabulous work, you three.
Yeah. Wow,
Yeah.
sounds absolutely gorgeous. So we'll come back to Phil's question and maybe put that one directly to Uros. Maybe you could tell us a little bit of an answer to Phil's question there about the, the volume disparity, let's say, and then talk about that setup that you've got there for this recording, Uros.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think generally speaking, whenever you are recording guitar with any other instrument, it will always be a little bit softer in terms of dynamics. Obviously, the dynamics of violin and guitar in general will overlap in the middle, but I would explain it almost like a mezzo forte of a guitar is almost like a mezzo piano of a violin. I think Katrina and Roberto did a fantastic job in preparing these arrangements, getting the balance right from the get-go. That was very important for me. But obviously, whenever you're working with multiple microphones, you will have a different feeling than just listening to a performance live. So for me in a studio, when I just went in the live room and listened to what they played, it seemed absolutely perfect. But obviously, it's really important that I have the flexibility to kind of raise the overall volume of Roberto's guitar just a tiny bit in case it's needed.
Mm-hmm.
And that is also kind of influences the choices of what type of microphones you are going to use for the guitar. So you'd obviously need something that sounds good up close on a guitar, but also something that kind of rejects the sound from behind the capsules quite well. And I had that with the Earthworks SV33 microphones, a pair of them. They're obviously they are vocal microphones, but they work well on the guitar as well. So on those microphones, I could almost not hear any of the violin, which was fantastic. So I was really flexible in the mixing of this session.
And you gave yourself the flexibility with that setup.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you had that in mind. I see.
Yeah, but that said, it wasn't really. It wasn't a big adjustment at the very end. Just listening to the main two microphones, which were the Schoeps CMC6. Just on those, it basically it feels perfect. It just maybe you need a little bit more punch in the soft parts of Roberto's playing, but not everywhere. It's kind of it was kind of adjusting through the mixes, and it was not always the same kind of balance for all the tracks.
So you went in and sort of changed things a little bit, dependent upon where it is in the track or where it is, what section you'd like to bring out or what instrument you'd like to bring out, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, with the guitar, whenever you have a resguardo part, it's always going to be too loud, even to an instrument like a violin. So you have to even take out some of the dynamics there. But there are certain parts that are lyrical, plucked, only a single melody line on the guitar. In those cases, you will need to adjust the volume much more than some other parts.
And did you find yourself making the adjustments mostly with the Earthworks, or were there other? Because I think I counted 6 or 8 total microphones that we were looking at in that shot.
Yeah, probably 8. I'm not so sure anymore, but at least 6 and probably 8, I would say. Yeah. But I think the two microphones back in the room were set up more as room mics, and I didn't really use them much. Maybe just a touch of them.
Yeah. Well, it's very much a great produced sound, and I mean this insofar as you don't hear it at all. It sounds like you're in the room with two fantastic musicians, and one of the, I think the aspects of your production is that it's always a very, very light touch, and you feel like you're experiencing a performance, which I would imagine is probably rather important to you.
Yeah, is this a question for me?
That is, yes. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love the natural sound, not overly produced sound. It's of course it's different feeling, the different way of working than in a really great sounding hall, a bigger space.
Yeah.
But there are always pros and cons. I kind of like also the more intimate rooms. But it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to mix a good sound out of it. Also, my first studio that Matthew McAllister knows really well, because he's visited me so many times there. That was a really small room, and I used to mix and record both in the same space. I have a little bit more space now in our new house here. 2 separate rooms and also an apartment next door. So I have much more flexibility and kind of a little bit bigger live room, which already makes on its own a better image, better stereo image, better sound, better real feeling of, so that you don't have a feeling that you absolutely must do so much to the sound to make it great. So it already sounds good on its own. Now, I don't like to tinker too much with it, with the sound, so that it almost sounds fake. You know what I mean? I love the sound of big rooms, big cathedrals, halls, churches, whatever. But it's a different type of sound. I also like the studio sound. It's just different. I don't know.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely. And Uros, you brought up something that I'd like to bring back to Katrina and Roberto, and that is that when they arrived at your studio, they arrived with the mix kind of already under their fingers. And so a lot of that, Katrina and Roberto, that must, I would imagine that starts in rehearsal. And I would imagine that starts with having a very, very clear understanding about how you're going to approach your performance and the arrangements themselves.
Yeah, I think definitely a lot of the repertoire that we've played, we've performed in concerts, and I think there's that period of, you know, once you've been playing something for an amount of time, you have that ability to just gauge each time. You know, sometimes things feel in rehearsals, you know, Roberto will say, can you be softer there? And I'll say, well, can you be more there? You know, so there's this constant you know, trying to compromise, I guess, between what each of our instruments can do in terms of the extent of volume, so that we don't feel like Roberto doesn't feel like he needs to push the sound from the instrument, which, you know, makes it not as nice sounding, of course. And for me, I still feel like I can have some quality of sound even if I'm playing extremely softly. And actually a really nice thing is in concerts, it is mentioned that, you know, the balance between you both is really well. And, you know, first concerts we do use a little bit of amplification, but just, you know, really just a touch. And I guess it's from playing it together for this period of time that you kind of learn which moments, you know, we might need to back off in, or moments where the other one can be freer and more expressive. And I think that really helped us once we got into Uros's studio, just to sort of say, this actually does work, and our instinct is correct. You know, we're playing so close to each other, and sometimes it can feel quite big regardless, when actually you want the sound to be really soft and really delicate. So it's great to have that kind of cemented before we got there.
It's very tricky these days to get students to, I mean, I'm kind of jumping into teaching a wee bit just now, but to get students to understand this in chamber music, because often when guitarists play with other musicians, they learn so much. You know, if they play with a bowed string player or a wind player or a singer, they learn about line, you know, and phrasing outside of this plucked string and quite percussive instrument, actually, in a way that we play, and obviously Roberto plays, and Matthew and Uros. You know, you're kind of outnumbered by the plucked stringers tonight, Katrina. But you know, quite often, like students nowadays, they hear music in a very, it's a two-dimensional is probably the wrong word, but like it is very hyper mixed, and quite often all the instruments are kind of at the same volume. And it's a little bit of a problem of modern day recording, is that actually the scale and the depth of the dynamic is kind of lost. The way people listen to things in earphones, earbuds, everything's very highly compressed. They're streaming a lot of music. And I think people are losing a little bit that sort of human experience of understanding that the instruments are inherently different. They attack different. They have a different dynamic range, and then how do you do all those things that you just described? And that Uros said, actually, when they came in, they kind of rehearsed in the right way, and like you're saying, you know, experience of concerts, getting that balance, because it is so important. I mean, they're naturally very different dynamics, and that should be celebrated as well in the way that you play. But Roberto not having to sit there and play, I don't know, triple forte all night, like, you know, and then you have no sound and stuff like that, you know. But it's really interesting to hear your playing, because, you know, I've done so much chamber music, you know, with so many different, you know, singers, other musicians. Now Matthew and I are doing so much guitar, but with guitar, actually, Matthew's a little bit louder player than me. So even with two guitars, we're like, oh, we have to just remember, and we have to just think about our balance. And that is nothing compared to the what was it you described it, Uros? It was like Roberto's mezzo forte is Katrina's mezzo piano, I think, roughly. Yeah.
Yeah. Roughly, yeah. But that's just the nature of the instrument.
Yeah. But imagine like saying that to a conductor, they'd just be horrified. Like, you know, well, this can't possibly happen. Like, you know, so it's like, you know, but it's just such beautiful music making. You know, when I think you have those challenges there, and you said something really interesting, Katrina, which is like, you know, you still feel like you're playing with a good sound and playing the right way. Because I used to work with a violinist many years ago, and we had great fun on this, because he used to say like, oh, it's so difficult. Like, you know, after a certain dynamic, as you go down and down and down, you just lose that ability to pull the bow through and get that sound that you want. So we were always trying to make sure we didn't drop below that sort of like minimum sort of threshold of like, that's an acceptably good violin sound, you know. And it was like, I was going, oh my God, I've never thought about any of this stuff. You know, this is nuts, you know. So it's great to hear you guys talking about it. You know, it's fantastic. But we hear a bit more music. Sorry, Katrina?
No, yeah, that's great. I was just going to say, actually, if anything as well, having that difference in what the capabilities of our instruments and maybe what we're used to, you know, with the knowledge of our own instruments, then it pushes you to be more extreme as well. You know, for instance, if I'm always working with other bowed string colleagues, then we might not ever have the discussion about how soft we can, you know, really go sometimes. And it's just as you were saying then. So I think personally for me, it pushes me to be a better version of myself in a chamber setting, so that I can be the best partner for Roberto in that sense. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Your best version, was it? Your best version of
best version of violin and guitar, you know, best version.
That's amazing. That's amazing. But these things do provoke us to be better musicians than when we're just on our own. Because when we're on our own playing, we just sort of, I don't know, don't we just default to what we think is okay and our standard, and no one's asking us to try something different, you know? I mean, I had that in November when I was recording with Matthew over in Michigan, and I basically couldn't play something, you know? And he's saying, it needs to be faster. And I'm like, okay, well, you go for a drive around the block and come back in 5 minutes. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, and then he comes back and I'm like, you need to keep going. You just go around another time. I mean, I'm not quite there yet, you know, just give it a minute to warm up here, like, you know.
I have no recollection of that whatsoever.
Yes, you do. Well, listen, we're going to check out a little bit more music, and we're also going to get a chance to see Uros' studio, I think not in the nighttime, but in the daytime, which is very beautiful. So I'm terrible with the pronunciation of this track, Roberto, so I think I have to defer to you on this one. What are we about to hear?
So it's Wahra, which translates very roughly to The Dance of the Mature Wheat, which is a great title. The author is Atahualpa Yupanqui, which is was an Argentinian guitarist.
Ah, fantastic. Well, here we go. Let's have a little listen to some of that.
That's pretty great.
Nice.
Very nice, very nice. And I can hear some of that stuff that you were talking about earlier, Uros, with like the dynamic of the guitar actually being really quite big, especially in those rasgado and then the other type of strumming that Roberto's doing, so this almost kind of offbeat, syncopated kind of stuff, you know, that's very percussive. So that does give you those dynamic challenges to balance.
Exactly. You just can't get away with just one balance in a track like this. With some, yes, some more classical period music, yes, you might. But if you have such a variety of techniques, then it's difficult, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, variety of techniques is absolutely the right term. I mean, all the textures that were happening in that arrangement. I mean, it's a really well arranged and really thought out piece, and boy, what a set of challenges that must have been for you, Uros, to like have to contend with when they arrived. Were you a little like, oh, how am I going to handle this?
Mm-hmm. But as I said, they really did a lot of work by themselves, so it's just enhancing what they are already doing.
Yeah,
in terms of balancing things out. So I love this piece. I think it's one of my favorites on the album.
I love the little mimicking of pizzicato, like at the beginning that you do. So you get your chance to pluck it like a guitar, Katrina, which is kind of cool. And then Roberto, see this? I don't know. I heard that the first time I was in South America, I played in Peru, and then I got taken on tour into Chile. So I went all the way down to the very south of Peru, and then we went into like Mollendo and Iquique, and then we came down into Santiago, and everywhere people were playing charango, and then all the traditional guitar players were playing with that strumming style. What is that? Like, it's so perfect, but I've never understood it, and I can never do it. I try, and I just sound rubbish.
It's just kind of like a very typical strumming pattern. It's like, say, for instance, if you're learning folk guitar in Chile or in Argentina, there's a lot of like these rhythmical patterns that repeat, and maybe the most like typical thing is like that kind of like, we call it kind of like a chasquido, which is like you hit the strings and mute them at the same time.
Yeah.
So it has to be like simultaneous, and it just sounds very percussive, which is brilliant. It's brilliant.
Mm.
And actually, one of the weird things is doing it, on classical guitar kind of like position. I find it very, very odd. I was actually thinking a tiny bit about that, because we have this set of 3 pieces where I use it a lot, and it just feels very odd to do it with the classical guitar side, because it's kind of like sideways. And I learned it when I was in school, so I learned it, not with the classical guitar kind of like position. But it's great, and there's so many different types of music and so many different dances, and they all have their own like unique strumming patterns that you need to learn. They're standard, at least ones, and then you can make a bit of variation over them.
It's great. It almost has a heartbeat quality to it when you kind of come back towards the strings and get that resonance, that sort of boom from the instrument as you sort of close the fist, I reckon, or whatever on the string. I remember a guy, I can't remember his name now. He was an amazing young guitarist trying to show me how to do it. And at one point you could see he was just like, okay, well, you can just strum it like this, And I was like, thanks. So I think when you said you learned it at school, I reckon you have to learn it when you're young. You have to get it.
I think the problem, Matthew, is that if you are trying to do it from an academic point of view with a very clean technique, it's not gonna work. But at the moment you stop caring, you will manage the chest.
Okay, stop caring. Right.
It's like teaching tambora. Like if you teach tambora to a young kid, they go like, "Oh yeah," immediately first try. And you teach it to someone like much older, and they go like, "Oh no, I have to be really careful. I'm gonna hit like my guitar."
Wow, that's amazing.
But you must run into that. You must run into that problem from time to time, Roberto, because you're obviously taking folk music as your starting point, and then you're the two of you are creating something, I think, rather. Is it removed from folk music? Where do you start and where do you go to create the arrangements that you are playing?
So I tried to take inspiration of some of them. Like there's so many sources, isn't it? And it's difficult. Actually, on the CD, we decided to put like one small paragraph about like all the people that inspired us. I think like at times, when someone makes like a new like hit song or something, they should have like the same thing that they have like in academia, like those quotes saying like, "Oh, well, actually, I took this idea from this and that and that and that," But the first source was mostly folk music. I would say was kind of like the main for some of the tracks, not all of them, but some of them were very, very heavily influenced. Like Wajra was one of them. Alfonsina y el Mar was another one, very famous. But yeah, I think we went to the first source instead of going to the billions of arrangements that there are about them, which are some are just so beautiful. But at the same time, it was how far we can push it, still being kind of like classical guitar and violin.
Did you ever find yourself in unfamiliar or uncomfortable territory? Did you push it too far ever and then decide, oh, we've got to bring that back? This is too much one thing or too much the other?
At times, I think, like when trying to bring elements, trying to bring different textures, at times there's moments that it can make it feel just like you're pushing the instrument in a way that it doesn't feel that natural, or it doesn't add as much as you were hoping. But maybe Katrina can speak a tiny bit more about that, because you were the one that decided to go at times like, oh, I'm gonna do this like this. Or when I put you like double pizzicatos, I was like, I don't know if she can do it, but I'm gonna put it anyway. Let's hope for the best.
I guess it was interesting, whenever you get a first draft from Roberto, he's put, sometimes he puts things in like question marks above, like, oh, let's try this, and should we try it at this octave, or should we try it at that below the octave? And occasionally I'll be like, oh, what if I did like false harmonics, and then what if I did like double stops, or like what if I did this? And I think the really beautiful thing about when you're arranging is that you get to have the autonomy over how you want it to actually sound at the end. And obviously there are times where it's just like, that's just too much and it doesn't work, because you get overexcited and you think, as Roberto said, you think it's going to add more than it actually really does. But I think for us, it didn't feel like we were taking really huge risks, because we really made conscious decisions about why we're playing things a certain way, and we're being mindful of trying to stay with the original idea, but obviously making it also belong to us now in our instrumentation. So I think there are moments where maybe we were experimenting and it didn't quite help, or it didn't add anything, but I hope that the result that we have now is good, basically. So we feel happy with it. So.
But that also speaks to the fact that, like, although the album is of course finished, and I think somebody jumped into the comments there and said, I've just bought the album. So there you go, you've had a sale this evening, which is amazing. Congratulations. What a feeling that is. People are now going to be sharing and experiencing your art all over the world. It's wonderful. But it's like, okay, the album's done, but the arrangements aren't done. And like, you might end up changing them depending on where you play, what concert halls you go to, what other music comes next in the process. I mean, I was just really, I just saw a comment coming in, which I'm going to put on the screen, because this is going to come. I'll get to my point eventually. You know what I'm like, but this will come full circle. A lovely comment here from a fellow guitarist, Lenny Rinaldo, who's an excellent American guitarist based in Philadelphia and also studied in Glasgow at RCS, which was obviously formerly the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama, is now the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, where Roberto studied, where Katrina studied. And Lenny now plays in a quartet, actually, that are doing very well with lots of other students. And he's just saying congratulations on the record, Roberto, Katrina, and Uros, which is just lovely to hear. But it got me thinking about, when you were talking about arranging there, that Uros has played arrangements of Roberto's with me in a quartet for a previous album on the record label on Baros Records when we did Philip Glass. That was Roberto putting that arrangement together. And then when we all came to Glasgow to record that, there was a whole host of like, oh, that bit, try that again. What's that note? Move this around. There was all that stuff that you processed, that you went through. And then Matthew and I have done the same thing with Roberto's arrangement of Interstellar. We've been like, oh, take that out. Oh, do more of this. Add that in, And it's lovely. It's like there's an interconnectedness of so much of this work. And Roberto, you're getting quite a name for yourself as the arranger. You're going to be getting people going, can you do this for me as well? Can you, you'll be, I don't know, you'll have Beethoven's Ninth getting arranged for Guitar Duo, in a year or something. I'm sure you could do it, Not that anyone actually wants to hear that, I must say, But in all the comments that have been streaming on, we missed a really nice question which came in a bit before, and it was along the lines of like, it's just kind of a general question of like, how long did it take to practice, record, edit, and then master? So I guess it's like the whole thing, I mean, how long were you there for? 2 weeks in Slovenia at Uros's house, or were you there for a couple of days? What was the process and how long did it take?
Uros, you want to go?
Katrina, you want to start with the pre-production, maybe, with the practicing bit?
Sure, yeah. Roberto and I, we've been playing this repertoire for a number of years now. We started playing together in 2017, where we met when we were both studying for our masters at the RCS, and shortly after that we started to play together, and particularly the tangos at the end of the album are the works that have just been the ones that we've played the most and had the most amount of time to sort of feel and whatever. So we decided with these new collection of the South American works that we wanted to record these at some point together, and we applied for the Athenaeum Fund at the RCS, and we were successful in that. So with that, it meant we had the opportunity to work with Uros, and I remember the first time I met Uros was at the CGR a couple of years ago, Matthew, and he also recorded us then in the cathedral, and I just remembered thinking, oh, this guy has really excellent ears and he is a great musician. And so when Roberto said, it's not easy to record classical guitar, I want to make sure that I'm going to someone who really knows his stuff. I really didn't have any hesitation in sort of saying, I agree, like I think Uros would be great and he would make an excellent CD. So I guess maybe that's a little bit of a precursor to Slovenia.
Just briefly as well. So most of the repertoire, some of it we knew it really, really well, and we've been playing it for a while. But at the same time, there were a few good tracks that we've never played that much. I would say half of the album was like completely new, more or less, and we did that like 3 months before, just getting it together and rehearsing it, and then the other one we've been just playing for ages.
And I think you spent 1 week total, right, in Slovenia? But we didn't use absolutely every day to record. Generally speaking, for most classical music productions at my place, it's usually 2 to 4 days of recording. Sometimes 5 if you're doing a lot of video stuff in between as well. If you're planning a promo video and then also 4 or 5 performance videos, that means a lot of extra time, because for each piece you are actually producing a whole set of background and setting up the microphones new, and also changing the angles of the multicam setup, so multiple cameras on tripods. It's a lot of work just preparing one scene, so you're losing a lot of time when you're doing video production in between takes. But in terms of audio production, it's typically 2 to 4 days, depending if you're doing any kind of editing in the meantime, during the session or not. In most cases, not. That means 3 or 4 days, 10 hours, I would say, each. Is just the recording, and then it's up to 10 days of editing with multiple revisions. That means usually 4 days of work for me just to have a base edit, and then we'll enter the process of revisions. Sometimes it takes 1, sometimes 2, sometimes it's 5 revisions. It all depends on the style of music, of how difficult it is to edit. And then also mixing. Sometimes it just takes very little time in solo projects normally, but in chamber music, obviously, it may also take 2 to 3 days just to do that.
Wow. So you were there for a week?
Yeah, and I have to mention, but they were here during the worst natural disaster in the history of Slovenia. So there were floods all over the place, and for a few days we weren't even sure if we were gonna be able to get them back to the airport.
Oh my.
You remember, there's one bit of the bloopers that there's a thunderstorm and they're drinking wine outside, but of course not outside with a roof over their head, but still in the background you can kind of see where usually the road is and some meadows there. You could see a lake forming. It was just crazy.
Oh, there's nothing like a bit of natural disaster to help a recording session along, just like just add a little bit of jeopardy. Not like it's hard enough, 10 hours a day slaving away.
But imagine, a production like that, but in a church, full week of just hail, and hail, nothing else, just heavy rainfall. It would be impossible. It would be almost, unsolvable.
Are you enjoying your new studio then, Uros? Because obviously I'm very familiar with your previous place, but and I've seen the sort of beginnings of it forming, and then taking such an interest in Roberto and Katrina's project, I've got to see the inside of it so much more. I mean, are you happy?
Yeah, I'm really happy. I really enjoy the huge amount of light in the live studio. I did purchase acoustic curtains for the big panorama windows, but usually the artists and also me, when I'm doing my own projects, I just love the light so much, even if it's not, maybe if it's 1% worse for the sound, I just leave everything open and just enjoy the light. It's always really lots of light, and it really helps to stay focused for a longer period.
Energy.
Yeah, it gives you an energy for sure. It's still not completely finished, the studio. I'm still making changes, especially in terms of workflows. For example, the Roberto and Katrina's project was the first one where we not only recorded with 3 or 4 cameras, I'm not sure, but I was using time code for the first time. So that's it's always nice things that you try to introduce just to make the post-production a little bit easier on yourself. So that was a new thing then. So I just built a completely new wall of wooden slats. And I'm always changing little things. Now I have this big wall of guitars in my control room, so it's always something is changing. So I haven't done a proper studio tour yet, but I'm planning to do one in a few months, maybe.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, we'd really love to be involved in that. That'd be great.
There you go.
You should come visit.
We should.
I think we will before too long. I'm sure we'll be flying through Slovenia soon enough at some point. I like the wooden slats. I saw it in the Cordoba guitar video really recently that you put on your channel. I think I saw this new wooden beams coming down. It looks very cool.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So I'm always watching. You might think I'm not, but I'm always watching. I'm always paying attention. We've got possibly a question just showing how neurotic guitarists are. But I kind of agree with it. And this one's just for Katrina. Are violinists as obsessive about their search for the perfect instrument and strings as guitarists?
Oh my God, we're absolute nerds. I mean,
be honest here. Be honest.
Maybe I'll just speak for myself, but I would say instead of the perfect instrument, I would say maybe the perfect setup for the instrument that you have. So for me, I know the sort of limitations on my instrument, but what I'm looking for maybe is I'm always looking to see if there's a better string for maybe a better sound on particularly maybe the lower strings when I'm going in high positions. You know, there's this thing about comfortability. It's not very natural to have a violin maybe hanging out your left side. So, you know, there's things like chin rests, shoulder rests, and like a magnitude of different things to kind of tamper around with as well. And then obviously we have our bow as well. So there's all these things about matching your bow with your violin and then your strings. And living in Scotland at different times of the year, your instrument can sound a bit different because of the weather as well. So you might want to change your strings according to the weather. I really do sound quite mental. So I would say, yeah, we are just about as obsessive, it seems. Yeah. Roberto's seen me in the room, like changing my strings and saying to him, which one sounds better? Like, listen to this. And then I'll even ask him, actually, could you maybe just bow a few open strings so I can hear if there's a difference in the sound?
And he's like, it sounds absolutely the same.
Yeah. It's the neurotic nature of performing artists.
Mental musicians.
I know.
Yeah.
Katrina, you were once looking for a bow for like about like a year and a half. And it was honestly just saying like, what do you think? Does number 1 or number 2 sound better? Which one? And this went on for like, honestly, I just couldn't understand anything. And me, on the other hand, I do mind like the guitar that I play, but actually I prefer much more not to travel with the guitar at all if possible. So I normally, if I'm in another country, I end up just trying to find like a decent guitar and just play on that one. So it's like we're completely different ways of approaching it. For me, it's much more stressful to travel with the guitar than anything else.
Yeah.
That's why I like cheap guitars.
Yeah. It's like we said earlier on. It's like just learn to stop caring, and then you're fine. You can do it all. Like, you know, it's. I think that it's, I don't want to say we're all getting old, you know, but I love that neuroticism of the musician. Like, it sounds better, right? Honestly, can you hear it? Can you hear it? Like, one of you might remember from years ago at the guitar retreat, the manager of the cathedral was a guy who'd been really involved in classical music all of his life, David, and he'd helped manage like the Edinburgh Festival Theatre and all sorts of different, you know, ensembles and groups. And he had the most amazing stories about, like, you know, really neurotic musicians turning up and saying, I need a chair that's exactly 23 centimeters off the floor. And he'd be like, I've got it. Hold on. Would go off, bring back a chair. Who knows how high it was. Put it down and go, that's the one, exactly as you want. We've gone to, you know, we've got it. And the guy would sit down and be like, perfect. Yes, I can absolutely tell that this is the right height of chair. And he's like, good, glad you can, you know, or like stuff like, it's too warm. Let me go and turn the heating on. Goes outside, just has a look outside for a while, smokes a cigarette, comes back in. That's the heating on. Feeling warmer? Oh yeah, it feels a lot warmer. You know, it's like, I think it's, you know, so much of it is in our mind. You know?
Oh, so much of it, if not all of it, is in our mind. I mean, that's the difference between, that's why the practice room and the concert hall are such different places, because our mind, unfortunately, follows us from the one place to the next.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I freaked myself out on Thursday to Friday with a set of strings. Like this conversation is uncomfortable for me right now, because like right before I had, like, we were in a sound check on for a Thursday night concert, and I just put some new strings on, and they didn't work. I can't tell you why. It didn't work. There was too much tension or something. Couldn't possibly tell you now. So I changed my strings. They were a different set of strings, but to me, it was like the difference between the Thursday night concert and the Friday night concert, which had all the same people, which had all the same repertoire, which had almost all the same other components. Those strings made a huge difference. And somehow psychologically, I was so much better off. Was I actually? I don't know, but I felt better.
Yeah. It's so difficult to tell with these things. Like, sometimes you think like the science of it would help, like, you know, being able, if say somebody had recorded those two performances and then you could watch them back and be like, oh, it's exactly the same, or no, I feel completely different. But we can't take for granted the fact that when you do feel a certain way, because you're trying to be expressive, and then also like you want a level of technique to be comfortable, if your mind is right, that will happen. But if your mind isn't right, all the things that are wrong become these insurmountable forces where you're like, that's why, because it's just this, or, you know, I think it sounds fickle, And I was having a joke with it earlier on with these stories, but these things are they help people express themselves, and it's, even if it is a bit neurotic and a bit mad, I've drank the Kool-Aid. I'm signed up,
Well, this actually kind of brings us to a question that I have for Roberto and Katrina. So, another complication I would imagine of your duo is the fact that you are also a married couple. And so how would you say that is to perform as a married couple? I know, well, I don't think I'll specify any further. I'd like to hear a little bit of that. You got to go out on stage and you got to do the thing.
Yeah, there's a lot that we could talk a ton about that. It's great. Yeah, just absolutely dying there. But I think the audience's reaction to when we tell them that we're married, there's always like two kinds of people, and you can tell where they are in their minds when they ask us, and they go like, "Oh, really? You're married? That's so fantastic, working together." And the other reaction is like, "Oh, really? Sure, great." and that tells so much about the thing. There's a certain moments where it can be a bit complicated, and there's some that are so easy and just so easygoing. And I think our personalities are so different that honestly it's a bit hilarious. It's like Katrina says, like, I'm completely horizontal when it comes to like stress, or like nothing remotely stresses me or gets me like really worried about anything. And Katrina, on the other hand, she just absolutely, like, at times she's just like vibrating with anxiousness at times, certain things. So it's just very, very different. And
you did this, Mark.
that.
You did this.
I know. I did it on purpose. I want to keep it going.
Not your fault.
I'd like to hear what Katrina has to say about that.
Do you know what? It is really true. I think I am so like, I feel I'm a lot more like excitable than Roberto. Shall we put it like that? And sometimes I feel like I just want to shake him a little bit and say like, "Oh my God, are you not excited more excited about this?" Or like, "Are you not more whatever?" And but you know what? Ultimately, I think the rehearsal times are sometimes a bit tricky, especially when he's telling me to play less and I'm telling him to play more, or like we don't have an agreement on a musical phrasing or like a passage or whatever. But I think ultimately when it goes to the performance side or like the concerts, we both really try to just be generous in our approach, actually. And I guess it's really lovely to play a program that also that a lot of people won't have heard as well. So I guess the spontaneity of the concert and like having to share that with the audience as well takes us away from feeling like we're a married couple playing to an audience, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I very much feel like in the moment when we're in the concert, we're two musicians and we're trying to deliver a program to audiences, and then the marriage is just something that ties us better or maybe gives us a better connection whilst we're on stage. But in terms of sharing as well, it's different when the audience hear me talk. Of course, it's going to be different to the way how Roberto presents something as well. So I think it's quite good that they get the yin and yang of the Escocia Duo, maybe. Yeah, I would say. Yeah.
Very diplomatically handled, both of you. Well done.
So you didn't get the soap opera that you were looking for there?
Not even close. No.
You didn't get the dirt.
Kind and generous people. We have to be. We're going to have to switch things up with our guests here.
Yeah, you're going to have to. They were looking for some salaciousness. Maybe we'll get Uros on. Uros, you can. Is that all true?
Yeah, Katrina had a very diplomatic answer. I was looking for more drama when Roberto started speaking. It just didn't evolve.
Yeah. Or devolve.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we're just about hitting the hour mark, which is kind of where we like to sort of keep the Duo Talk episodes. We've got some beautiful music that everyone's going to hear to play everyone out. So everyone listening and watching, you're going to hear a little bit more of the beautiful performance of Roberto and Katrina just as we say goodnight. We've got more Duo Talks planned and coming up, so stay tuned, because Matthew and I will be sharing details about some of the episodes that are coming up soon. And also we're going to be on tour very soon in America, so there'll be lots of bits and pieces coming out soon, and lots of concerts. If you want to hear Roberto and Katrina perform live, they will be performing at the Return of the Classical Guitar Retreat this summer in beautiful Laidlaw Concert Hall over in St Andrews. So you will be, I'm sure, presenting a lot from your album that evening or that afternoon when you're playing. So you can have a lot of people can come and listen to you perform live, which is great, and see if the drama is true, you know. And Uros, we will for sure be having you over in Scotland before too long as well, and get you back to the guitar retreat as well, because that'll be a lot of fun. Kind of feel like so many people met there, you know, over the years, which is lovely. But it's been just such a pleasure to have you all on.
Thank
you so much for having us.
Thank you, and congratulations on the project. These are fantastic tracks, and to all of our listeners, thank you very much for being a part of the conversation. We would encourage you to take a listen to this album. It's a really special project.
Absolutely. And we have just got, you know, look what a great start to the Duo Talks. Thank you all so much. And Gail's wanting some details about the tour. We will put all these things will go in the descriptions, and all these things will be coming out soon. I will put a link to Roberto and Katrina's album at Baros Records, so people can purchase a copy, and also where they can listen to it on different streaming services. All that information will go probably tomorrow after the Duo Talk system comes through as a podcast as well, and people can listen to it. We're going to play it out, or you are going to play us out with some beautiful Egberto Gismonti, the wonderful Agua y Vino. So thank you all so much again, and let's have a listen to you playing some beautiful music by Gismonti.